Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm back to doing YouTube videos every so often, and not just meme videos, but theories and chats about what's going on in my favorite franchises. I started out doing Star Wars and Harry Potter videos, and eventually some Hunger Games videos, but I've been so obsessed with the MCU recently, and that trend might continue for a little while longer. If anyone does wish for me to do a couple Star Wars, Harry Potter, or Hunger Games videos, please let me know in the comment section down below. Now recently, Marvel announced Phase 4 of the MCU, and one of those films that has been getting most of the press is Thor: Love and Thunder. And why not? It features the God of Thunder, his franchise has been rejuvenated in Thor Ragnarok, and it might be the film that answers whether Loki will return. It's the film I'm most excited for, and also the one I'm most nervous for. Let me first explain why we should be nervous for Jane Foster. It was announced that Jane Foster will be Lady Thor in Love and Thunder. Mighty Thor. This is based off of a storyline where Jane Foster is actually diagnosed with breast cancer, and each subsequent transformation into Mighty Thor purges her chemotherapy treatment. This means that each transformation into Thor weakens Jane, and she eventually succumbs to the disease. She is brought back by Odin in the comics, but Odin is also dead, so he won't be able to work his resurrection magic. Not that he ever needed to anyway. In short, this movie could very well be rough on Jane, like Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame were rough on Thor. Plus, after their mutual dumping, why else would Jane return to Thor's world if not to deliver the heartbreaking news of her diagnosis? Not to mention that the Dark World may have set up such a ton of events. Of course, she may not develop cancer in this movie. After all, it is being directed by Taika Watiti, who is known for injecting humor into the Thor franchise, and cancer isn't something you want to joke about. On to the Hemsworth Thor. I'm about to explain why we should be concerned for him, and brace yourselves. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up and listen as I explain why I'm concerned about Hemsworth's Thor in Love and Thunder. Consider the fact that Marvel Studios is owned by Disney, who also owns Star Wars. This means that anything Disney did with Star Wars is fair game when citing my reasons for my concern. In both Star Wars and the MCU, Disney has been promoting diversity in their franchises, a move I actually support. One observation I made is that when you are promoting diversity, you don't want to be perceived as utilizing reverse discrimination. This means that when promoting a more diverse cast of characters, you shouldn't tear down existing characters if they happen to be less diverse. When Marvel was getting ready to promote Black Panther, a prominent black superhero, and he debuted in Captain America: Civil War, not once did I feel that the white characters were being downgraded or degraded on his behalf. In fact, the one hero you would expect to see a downgrade on, Captain America, struck me as being even more formidable in Civil War than in any of his prior MCU appearances. The Civil War Cap would have been able to beat Loki in Germany without Iron Man's help. Marvel Studios was confident that T'Challa was able to shine off of his own merits, not through the degradation of any other characters. So with Thor: Love and Thunder promoting Lady, Mighty Thor, Valkyrie, and the likely return of Lady Sif, Marvel Studios sure isn't going to degrade Hemsworth's Thor in the process of promoting these ladies, right? When both Rey and Captain Marvel were being promoted as strong female characters, Disney seemed to think that such a promotion required the downgrade of certain male characters. With Rey, they downgraded Luke. With Captain Marvel, they downgraded Thor. Luke could have been on that island hiding from Snoke, a being with powers beyond what Luke or anyone has seen before. If Snoke got a hold of Luke, the consequences could be dire. So Luke has been researching Snoke and fully intended to rejoin the fight once he knew what he was up against. Luke could have been aware of Starkiller Base and feared that his presence would be felt by Kylo Ren or Snoke, and they would know where the Resistance base is. Not only does Return of the Jedi provide precedence for this plotline, but I could make a separate video on how Luke could have gone in this direction without changing The Last Jedi all that much. He was hiding on Ahch-To, having given up on the ways of the Jedi and turning his back on the galaxy. He was no longer using the Force and intended to die on the island. He never left the island and ultimately did die there. So, what about Endgame, the first movie to feature both Thor and Captain Marvel? After chopping off Thanos' head, assuming Endgame went in that direction, Thor retreats to New Asgard. Because Hela and Thanos popped up out of nowhere and caught Thor completely unprepared, he becomes paranoid that either Hela or Thanos could return, or a third villain pops up. Thor, therefore, becomes excessively protective of New Asgard and refuses to leave. During the time heist, Frigga could still corner him and he could still break down, which is perfectly understandable, but he does prove useful during the time heist. During the third act, he could still be beaten by Thanos because, it's Thanos. But then he could be shown taking out chunks of Thanos' army. After chopping off Infinity War Thanos' head, Thor retreats to New Asgard and allows himself to fall completely apart. He does nothing but drink beer and play Fortnite for 5 years, and refuses to leave his home unless beer supplies run low. His power levels have been severely downgraded since Infinity War. During the time heist, Rocket has to do everything, and in a deleted scene, Thor is pissing in public. By the time the final battle takes place, he substantially underperforms despite wielding both Stormbreaker and Mjolnir for a time. They make jokes about his weight throughout the movie. Now, were Luke and Thor degraded specifically to promote Rey and Captain Marvel respectively? Maybe not, but consider the following two things. When J.J. Abrams was asked about the backlash to The Last Jedi, he passed it all off as a hatred of women. Given that the degradation, or to be kinda, handling, of Luke was part of the backlash, one could argue that J.J. Abrams implied that the empowerment of women required the degradation of some men. However, he failed to draw a line between complaints about women and real criticism of The Last Jedi, when it shouldn't have been too difficult to do so. It might have helped Solo at the box office. Of course, if he did draw a line, then certain outlets really need to characterize his statements better. Look at what Endgame did with Thor using the what they did with Thor segment from a few minutes earlier and ask yourself, are there things in that segment that they would never do to a female character? I'm prepared to argue yes. If we look at Valkyrie, who also had a drinking problem, here is her one degrading moment. And she recovered her dignity rather quickly. Nor is there any reason to believe that her skill set was severely reduced during her time on Sakaar. Not that we know much about what it was beforehand. Imagine Jane Foster's Thor going through what Hemsworth's Thor went through in Endgame, or even Ragnarok and Infinity War. My take is they do a third of that at most. And if in Love and Thunder she does have cancer, I guarantee that they're not going to make a bunch of jokes about it.
What do you think is coursing through my veins right now? Cheese whiz?
So, will this movie alleviate my fears? Will they build Hemsworth's Thor back up, or kick him down even more? Assuming they don't end up seeing this video or a video to it, they may actually do the former. After all, they were able to build up T'Challa without spitting on Steve Rogers, so there really is no reason they can't promote Hemsworth's Thor alongside Portman's Thor, Valkyrie, and a possible Sith. The question is, will they? Finally, I just want to point out that not once did I ever oppose a female Thor, and that's because I'm the type of person who really wants to see Lady Loki appear in the MCU, so much so that some interpretation of her features very prominently in my Avengers 4 fanfiction. Granted, she mostly goes by Serena, but in Part 4 I do call her Loki. Of course, even if I manage to pitch the idea to Marvel Studios, or the idea of Serena suddenly goes viral, there's really one good reason she'll never appear in Love and Thunder, whether as Serena, a possessed Sith, Loki's daughter, or some other option. But I'll actually be fine with Marvel Studios spitting on Thor even more than they already did in Endgame. Just Just give me Lady Loki. Of course, I could settle for the triumphant return of Lady Sif, although I'll admit that I kinda ship her and Thor even more than I do her and Valkyrie.